Hello and welcome to part 3 of the platform game tutorial. In this video we'll finish up the Hungry Hungry Llama game, and we'll also take a look at how to recode the game using the absolute value function to make it run smoother. Alright, so if you have an account, go ahead and open up where you have all your projects stored, or if you just saved the file and don't have an account, go ahead and load up the game from last week. So I'm going to go ahead and load up the game here, and then go to see inside. Okay, so far we have a llama that can move across the screen left and right and jump up and down and interact with platforms and also detect the obstacle robot. So the next thing we're going to do in this game is we are going to create the level by adding more platforms. So we're going to go over to the sprite where we have our platform, and what we're going to do is add more of them to create a level. So what I'm going to do is go into costumes, and then if you're zoomed in like this, go ahead and zoom out so you can see the full board. Nope, that's a bit too much. Okay, there we go. Now this is centered on the sprite area here. So what I'm going to do is turn this into one object by holding on Shift and selecting both the blocks and then grouping it together. Now we can move it around as one object. So what I'm going to do is copy and paste this. So I'm going to do Control C and then Control V to paste another one. I'll bring that out. Let's say we do 3 platforms for level 1. So I'm going to paste that again. Now you'll notice that over here in the stage area, the platforms are just floating there. Now if you move them, they move together. So what we're going to do is move this somewhere just like in the center here, and then we're going to rearrange the platforms. So if you remember in the game, one of the mechanics and rules that we have to follow is that these platforms always have to be above the llama's ears, or the llama's going to sink down into the ground. So we have to take that into consideration when we're making the level. Now, if you notice here, that means these platforms will always be too high for the llama to jump in one jump. To solve that, what we can do is create a green rectangle using the rectangle tool. And it has to be the exact same green as this, so it interacts with it as if it's part of the ground. This allows us to do just a single jump and then jump up onto the platform without having our llama sink into the ground. So let's go ahead and create that. So I'll hit the rectangle tool, and we're just going to draw a small rectangle like so. And you can make this any size as long as the llama can jump onto it with just one jump. And we're going to change that color to the same green as the platform. So copy tool and green. There we go. Now what we're going to do is make sure the outline as well is green, so that way it doesn't sink through the rectangle there. We're just going to make sure it's the same green, and there we go. Alright, so let's start setting these up. So I'm going to move this around. Oh, right, we need to make sure we select the cursor tool again. So I'm going to move this around until it touches the ground. So see how I'm moving it here on the screen? This is also moving in the stage area. So we're going to give the llama some room to walk up to and jump. And then let's say we're going to put this one just slightly over here above it, so he has to do like a run and jump. There we go. Now the llama should be able to run and jump up to the platform. And then we're going to have the llama jump to this platform. Now another thing too is, remember, the llama will double jump if it touches green. So if it's jumping and it jumps in front of this platform, as soon as, even if its air touches the green, it'll be able to double jump. So we're going to make it a little bit higher there. And then we're going to put this one all the way up there. So that way it can't double jump up to that point. Alright, so let's test this out and see if it works. I'm going to hit go. Now let's see what the llama does. Oh right, always remember to unselect the object or it's going to move while you test it. So let's see. It lands on the green platform. Oh, and it looks like the robot's touching it, so it's going to keep on bouncing that way. So let's move this over, click stop, and let's re-edit this. So let's go down here, and we're going to move this closer to the llama over there. Nope, go up a bit. Now this is a bit tedious because of the way this is set up, because you can't put exact measurements in here. But once you have this here, you can also do it this way. Now we're going to move this over here, and maybe we'll just move the robot over here for right now, so that way it doesn't get in the way. And as you see, again, when I touch the sprite and select it, it'll go into its costume. So you just have to go back into here. And let's see. Definitely want to move this over to here. I'm going to move this down here. And then we're going to push this one back up here. Alright, let's try that. So llama, always remember to unselect. And jump up here, jump up onto the platform. And it's going to run and double jump. And double jump. Hey, that looks great. Alright, so now we have level 1. So what we're going to do is name this costume level 1. Alright, now that you have that, what we're going to do next is duplicate it so we have 2 levels. Now in this game we're only going to do 2 levels, but go ahead and feel free to add more afterwards. And I'll show you how we can switch between the levels in one moment. So to duplicate this, head on over to the costume area, right click and select duplicate. Now we have level 2. So in level 2 we're going to add another platform. So we're going to select a platform, hit Control C and Control V again. We're going to move this out. So when we design our levels, the first level usually introduces the players to all the mechanics and rules of the game. So we show them that they can single jump and double jump and to dodge the robot. In a few seconds we'll even add the donut sprites. But for right now we're going to do level 2, which will build onto that. So we're going to make it a little bit more complicated. So what we're going to do is move this green platform here to the middle of the screen. Middle-ish, doesn't have to be exactly middle. Yeah, it looks about right. And then we're going to put this one over here and this one over here. So now this will give the player a chance to explore the stage a bit. We'll make the player have to go to one side to get a donut and then go to the other to get a donut. And we're going to put this one over here. And then we're going to move this one over here so the player has to double jump up to it. It's always good to make it challenging for the player. Yeah, something like that. And then we're going to move this one over to this side. That way the player has to double jump to the other side. Alright, let's give this a try and see how the stage works. Alright, so, and I always forget to unselect the platforms here. Well, I'm going to unselect that. Alright, here we go. Now the cool thing here is there's a shortcut. Instead of having to come over here and just single jump up to this and single jump up to that, if the player was paying attention, they can just double jump. And then they can just double jump again. And it's always fun to add little shortcuts like that. Alright, it looks like our stage is working well. Oh, yes, and we'll have to move that robot so our llama doesn't detect it. We'll move the robots and the donuts in a minute. Now, speaking of the donut sprites, let's add that next. Alright, let's find some donut sprites. Head on over to the sprite library and scroll down to donut. There we go. Wow, that's quite a large donut. I think our llama would highly enjoy that, but we're going to make this fit in our game. So we're going to drop it down to about 30% of its size. And now we want to position this donut where we want it to start in level 1. So we're going to go back into Sprite 2, which let's name this levels, just to make it a little bit easier to find. Okay, now we're going to go back into the costumes, and we're going to select level 1. We're going to place this donut where we want it to appear when we start the game. So we're going to add some different code this time. We are not going to use the one-click block to start the code in this. Instead, we're going to use the when I receive block, which you can use in place of the one-click block as long as another sprite that has a one-click block uses the broadcast block. Now the way this is going to work is we're going to set the broadcast block in the llama, and when we start the game, the llama is going to broadcast a message, and the donut's going to receive that, and then it's going to go to this position. So let's do that. Select the llama, and we're going to go to the first one-click block, and we're going to add the broadcast block. Now we want to add this to where the llama initializes all its variables and goes to its starting position, and then we're going to have it broadcast to the donut sprite to appear on the stage. Now it'll all look like it's simultaneously happening because it's going through this code less than a millisecond. So what we're going to do is send a message. Now I'm going to send a different message. I'm going to send the message start. So it's good to send a message that represents what it's used for. So we want the game to start. We're going to name the message start. Alright, so now we have that. So when I click this green button here, it's going to broadcast this message after it puts all these values in the variables and goes to its starting location. So in the donut sprite, we're going to say when I receive the message start. So I'm going to say when I receive start, and then we're going to go to this X and Y coordinate by using a go to block. So let's see, where is the go to block? There we go. Now make sure these numbers represent the same numbers here. And then we want the costume to show itself, because in a moment we're going to program it to hide itself when the llama touches it, so that way it looks like the llama has collected the donut item. So we're going to go into looks, and we are going to select the block show. Alright, so there we go. So let's test this out. So I'm going to move the donut over here, and when I click the screen button, it'll appear right there. Excellent. Alright, so now we have this. Let's program the donut to disappear when it detects it's touching the llama, and then add points to a score. So we're going to use that score to switch the levels between the two levels. So let's start with the variable. We're going to go into variables. We're going to make a new variable, and we're going to name this one score. We're going to make it for all sprites, because all sprites are going to use this. And then we're going to go back into the llama, and we're going to initialize score to 0. So we're going to set score to 0 up here. So we're going to go here, and we're going to say set score to 0. Perfect. Now we're going to go back to the donut. Now what's going to happen is we need this to run forever along with the game code. So we're going to go and grab a forever loop from control. Now it needs to detect if the llama is touching it. So we're going to use an if block, of course, and put that in the forever loop. And then we're going to go to sensing, and we use the touching block. And we set that to llama. So if it's touching llama, we want to disappear and add 10 points to the score. So to do that, we're going to go into looks, and we're going to go to hide and place that in the if block. And then we're going to update the score by 10 points by using the variable block change my variable by, and we're going to change score by, and we're going to change that by 10. There we go. So if we go and collect this donut over here, it should update our score to 10. Yeah, there we go. Excellent. So now we need to create a function that will show the donut when we move to the next stage and put it in the right position. So we're going to do that with a function. So we're going to go to make blocks, and we're going to name this one level up D1 for donut 1. And we're going to run this without screen refresh. Click OK. Let's move that over here so we can work on it. So what we want to do is every time it levels up, we want to move the donut into a new position. And the way we're going to level up and switch the stage is using the score variable. So when the score reaches a certain score, it's going to change the level. In this case, since there are two donuts, and the donuts are going to change the score by 10 each time, when the score reaches 20, the stage is going to go to level 2. So to do this, what we're going to do is find an if block. And in the if block, we're going to use an operator equal to and the score variable. So go to operators and grab this block here with the equal to, and we're going to grab the variable score. So every time the score is equal to 20, we're going to go to level 2, and then we're going to move the donut into position and then show it, because once we collect it in this level here, it's going to hide it, so we have to show it again. So we're going to go to looks, grab the show block, and then we're going to use the go to block. Now why don't we go ahead and switch to level 2 and show the donut again by clicking the green arrow here, and then we're going to move that donut into position. So let's go into levels, and we're going to go to level 2, and we're just going to move this donut over here. Now that we have the x and y coordinate, let's go back to the code and input the x and y coordinate. So let's see, that is negative 175 and y is 26. So let's place this function block in here, and we're going to place it right above the if statement. I'm going to grab that and place it right there. Now what we're going to do is duplicate this, and it's going to contain all the same code, and then we're going to move those donuts into position, and then we're going to test it out. So we're going to duplicate this donut, and we're going to rename this one to D2, so that way it doesn't get confused with the first donut sprite. So I'm going to name this one D2 for donut 2. Alright, there we go. And now what we're going to do is go back to level 1, and we're going to switch this XY coordinate, and then we're going to go to level 2 and switch this XY coordinate. Then we're going to program the levels to change when score equals 20, so that way we can try it out. Alright, so let's head back to level 1. So we're going to go into costumes of the levels here. We're going to go to level 1, and we are going to restart this. Now what we need to do is show donut 2 here. Now it looks like donut 2 goes right to there. So I'm going to say we want the donut 2 to go right here. Perfect. Now we're going to go update that in the code. Oh wait, that's donut 1. So see how this is highlighted? So that's donut 1. So we want to keep donut 1 right where it was. So we can actually just move that out of the way. When we click the green flag, it'll go right back. So we're going to move that right to about there. Now we're going to update that in the code. So the XY coordinate when we start on level 1 is 150 for X and negative 53 for Y. And let's give that a try. So click this. Hey, there we go. Now for level 2, let's update the position for that. So we're going to go back into levels. And we're going to go and switch the costume to level 2. There we go. Now don't worry about that. That'll change in a moment when we test it out. I'm going to put this one right here. Now let's make sure donut 2 is selected and we can choose donut 1. And we're going to go into code and we're going to update donut 2's location. So that is 203 for X and 18 for Y. Alright, excellent. So next we are going to program the levels to switch when the score equals 20. But let's just make sure that the donuts go back to their right positions before we do that. So we're going to costumes, level 1, click the green flag, and there you go. It starts right where it's supposed to be. Alright, let's begin coding this stage. So let's head on over to code. And what we're going to do is we're going to start this code with the when I receive start. And the reason why we're doing this is if we put too many of these when clicked across a bunch of different sprites, sometimes those sprites won't appear or they'll act funny. Alright, and then what we're going to want to do is grab the forever loop, of course. And now we're going to create a function. So we're going to name this one level up stage. There we go. And run without screen refresh. Now what we want to do is when the score reaches 20, we want to switch the costume to level 2. So let's go ahead and grab an if block. And then we're going to go to operators. And we're going to grab the equal to. Place that into the if block here. Grab the variable score. And place that into this block here. Set it to 20. And what we're going to say is change costume. So we're going to change the costume to level 2. And there's that. And now we're going to put that block into the forever loop. Alright, let's give that a try. So we're going to collect all the donuts here. And if we do that, it switches to level 2. Look at that. That worked really well. Okay, so now we have to make a level up for the llama and for the robot. So before we move on to the robot sprite, what we need to do is add one more line of code to the stage. So that way when we click the green flag, it'll reset to level 1. So we're going to go back into code. And what we're going to grab is the switch costume. And we're just going to add that to here. We want to switch it to level 1. So that way when we click start, it'll go back to level 1. Let's try that now. There we go. Because without that, it'll just stay at level 2 and the donuts will just be floating in the air. Alright, let's move into the robot sprite and program a level up function for it. So go ahead and select it. And what we're going to do first here is we're going to move the robot into the starting position. So when we click start here, the robot will move right to there. So we're going to move the robot right about there. That looks like a good obstacle. And let's go to motion and grab the go to XY block. Make sure its coordinates are the same. If they're not, and put them in there. And we're just going to put that in the first forever block, or the first one clicked block. There we go. So when I click start here, the robot will go right to there. Let's move them over there. There we go. Now we're going to move into level 2. And we're going to have the robot go to another position. So I'm going to say we're going to have the robot right about here. Excellent. So we're going to note that. I'm going to go into the code. And let's grab that go to block. And say negative 68 minus 122. Not much of a difference, but it will make the stage a little more challenging. So we need a function, and we're going to make this one similar to the other level ups. So we're going to do level up robot, and go over here and grab an if block. So we're going to say if score equals 20. So back to operators, grab the equals, and say 20. Go into variables and grab score, and I'm going to place that there. So let's test that out. So I'm going to grab these donuts, and then there we go. The robot goes right to there. Now we need to work on the llama, because when the stage switches, we want the llama to start over here. So let's work on that. Okay, let's add a level up function to the llama. So go ahead and select the llama sprite, and make sure you know where these two one-click blocks are, the one with the collision function and the first one-click block we made for the llama. Because what we're going to do is just reuse this code in here, so that way when we go to level 2, the llama will start here. But we're going to change it up a bit. First, we're going to get rid of the broadcast code and all the code underneath that, so we don't need that anymore. And then we're going to remove the set score to 0. Because if we hit level 2, it's going to reset over here, and it's going to reset our score to 0 because of this block. Now if we want to add more levels later, we need the score to go up. So what we'll do is remove that. So first, let's go into make a block, and we're going to name this function level up llama. We're going to make sure run without screen refresh is not on. We'll click OK. Let's move this over here, somewhere where we can edit it. And then we're going to duplicate the code from set x velocity to 20 down. So we're going to duplicate this. We're going to move broadcast and all the code underneath that. Remove set score to 0. Put this all back together. Now before we put this in the function, we need an if then block that checks to see if score equals 20. So we're going to go to control, get an if then block. Go to operators, get an equal to and set it to 20. So there we go, and then we want 20. Now we need the variable score. Perfect. Now we'll add all these blocks into the if then block. And let's place this new function under collision here. So we'll go down to my blocks and find level up llama and place it there. Alright, let's test it out. So we're going to restart the game and go try to collect these donuts. 1 donut and then 2 donuts. And now we're at level 2. And you'll notice that our llama is stuck at the start. And that's because we're in this forever loop here. So let's continue looping through here. And since score is 20, it's entered this function. And it's not going to exit this function until score changes. So to do that, we're going to increment score up by 1. So let's go into variables, and we're going to grab a change by block, place it at the bottom, and we're going to set change score by 1. So now you'll see it's at 21, and we can move around. Now let's see if we can collect these donuts. It looks like that robot is too close for us to jump over. So we're just going to fix that real quick. Move that down there. And we are going to go into its level up function and reset its x and y coordinates to 81 and negative 127. There we go. Now it's still an obstacle, but we have room to jump. Now let's reset and see what happens. So we're going to jump, jump, grab these donuts. Now you notice that we're having some funny problems with the donuts here. One didn't appear. And that's because when we enter here and it changes score by 1, the donuts are to change and show when the score equals 20. So it's changing to 21 before the donuts can detect it. So what we're going to do is change each donut's level up function to 21 instead of 20. And this should show the donuts when we reach level 2. So let's try that again. So now we're here. We're going to collect all the donuts, 1 and 2. And there we go. Now they show up. Now we should be able to collect all the donuts. Perfect. Now we've reached the point of where we're going to end the game. Now before we code the game to end, let's talk about adding more levels. So if we want to add more levels, what we'd have to do is keep track of the score. So we know that at level 1 the score ends at 20, and then at level 2 the score ends at 41. So all we'd have to do is go into levels, duplicate the costume, and make another one, so level 3. Go back into the code, duplicate this, and set it to if score equals 41, and then switch costume to level 3. Now if you want to level 4, what would happen is after you collect these 2 donuts, is it equal 41, and then we move to level 3, and then increment by 1, so it would equal 42. And then you complete that, and that would equal 62. And then you set the next one to 62, and so on and so forth. But what we're going to do now is add a game over screen. And how that's going to work is we're going to go into Llama, and what we want to do is get costume C of Llama. Now, I deleted Llama C here, so all I have to do to get it back is go into here to choose a costume, click it, and we're going to go all the way down to Llama. And you can see we have access to all the different costumes for each of the different sprites. So let's go ahead and go down to Llama. Wow, there's a lot of awesome sprites in here. Now let's grab Llama C. Alright, now what I'm going to do is put thanks for playing. I thank the player for playing. So we're going to grab the text box here, and click, and we're going to say thanks for playing. And we're going to add some exclamation marks. Now let's change that to a color that we can see. Because see, purple doesn't really show up there. We need to make this a little bit bigger. Something like that. Oops, and now it's backwards. So let's flip that back around. So we're going to grab that. Now it's showing it backwards, so we'll go that way. Go like that. Now it's backwards here, but on the screen over here it's not. So don't worry about that. So just make sure you write down what you want first, and then I'll put it back to the way it is. So now that we have that, what we're going to do is change the color. So let's change it to something that shows up through. So yeah, yellow looks good. You can see that. Thanks for playing. We'll make that even slightly bigger. There we go. And move it so it shows up on the screen. So there we go. Excellent. So now that we have that, what we are going to do is go into Llama, go into code, and we're going to say if score equals 41, switch to Llama C, pointing in negative 90 degrees, or the negative 90 direction, and then stop the script, which will then terminate the game. And that way the player will have to come back up here and select the flag. So let's do that. So what we are going to do is grab an if then block from here. We're going to duplicate this block over here. And we're going to duplicate this one here. We can just get rid of that one. We're going to say equal to 41. And then what we're going to say is switch costume to C. So let's see, Llama C. And we want to make sure it's pointing in direction negative 90, so that way this wording here doesn't go backwards. So we're going to go up to motion, and we're going to go to the direction. So let's see, there's point in direction, and we want to set that to negative 90. There we go. And then we want the code to end. We want the game to end, so that way no one can control the llama anymore. So what we're going to do is go into control, and we're going to go all the way down, and we're going to select stop all. And this will stop the script from running. So you see now, because the score equals 41, I can't move the llama, and the game is over, and it says thanks for playing. Alright, so let's try this out. So I'm going to go up and start the game again. And what you notice here is that the llama starts as llama C. So all we need to do to fix that is come over here and go into looks and go to switch costume, and we're going to go to llama. And this will, when we click the start button, it'll always go to the first costume of llama. Alright, so let's play the game and let's see what happens when we end the game. So I'm going to collect this donut, jump the robot, we're going to grab this donut, shortcut, trick the robot here. Oh, I guess I didn't trick the robot. Got to jump over him. And there we go. Now you see it gets stuck over here. What we want is it to go down to here. So what we need to do is go back into the level up function. We're going to duplicate this in here. And we're going to place that. Oh, let's also remove point in direction 90. That'll make it shake back and forth. We don't want that. We can do that. And place that on top. And now, when we reach the end of the game, it should go back to the starting position. So we're going to collect the donuts again, 1 and 2, do a little shortcut, trick the robot, jump, jump, and there we go. Now we notice that's kind of off over here. So what we're going to do is move this over, note the X and Y position, and change it over here. So negative 179. And there we go. That finishes the game. Okay, now before we end this video, I want to show you how to recode this game so you don't have to use color sensing. And that way you can use any color platforms you want for your game. So let's go check that out. Alright, so here is the game recoded using the absolute value function instead of color detection to detect whether or not we're touching a platform. And you'll also notice that we have a slope here. So I'll show you in a moment how we can program slopes into our games and have our sprites climb up and down them. But you'll notice now our sprite detects the ceiling. So it can detect if there is a platform above it. We can still double jump, but we don't need to be near a platform to do it. So we're going to double jump up here, collect the donut. I'm going to do a very big running jump, another running jump. And you notice too that in the last game, sometimes the robot or the llama wouldn't say what we programmed it to. But now that we're using a different way of animating our robot sprite and our llama sprite, well in this case just a llama sprite, will say stuff. Pretty cool, right? So let's see if I can get that last donut over there. Now there are still a few bugs I'm working out, but you can see that's a lot more challenging, especially with that robot over there. It's very hard to jump over him, so you have to time it just right. And of course you can change the timing and the jumping and stuff to match how difficult you want the game to become. So let's see. Jump. Ah, there's the next donut. And it goes to level 2. And you can see here I can't jump through there, so I'll have to jump over the robot, grab the donut. Now he's chasing me. Jump over and collect the next donut. Now I set this game to loop over and over again. So now that you've seen the game in action, let's check out and see what's inside. Okay, so let's take a look at the code inside the advanced Hungry Hungry Llama game that uses absolute value and other mathematical equations to detect whether or not we've touched a platform or the ceiling of a platform instead of using color detection, which will make our game run a lot smoother. So let's take a look here. So we do the standard here. We go to the starting location, point in the right direction, make sure the rotation is left to right so the llama won't be upside down if we go to the left side of the screen. We set the velocities, and these here are just going to be used to detect whether or not we've double jumped. So when I hold down space, we don't want to just jump all the way through the screen. Next, we're going to switch our costume to the Hipbox. Now we're using a Hipbox in this one. So let me show you what that is. So we're going to go into costumes. Now you notice I have these here. These are just plain old rectangles that cover the entire sprite. What that allows me to do is when I'm jumping here, instead of detecting this area here of the llama or this area here, which if you notice in the last game we just created, sometimes the llama would get stuck. Instead what it's doing is detecting these edges. Just show you how that works in the function. But if you notice here, I'm not going to get my nose stuck on this platform. And that's because it's detecting these edges here instead of these edges. Now how it works is if we go down here into the animation code, which we'll talk about when we get to it, but I just want to show you this real quick. I'm flickering the hitbox between the hitbox sprite or hitbox costume and the llama costumes of llama B and llama. Now it's happening so fast that we don't see it, but the computer does, and it's only detecting the hitbox. Now we use the word hitbox because that's just standard of what they use in game design. Hitboxes were originally designed for like Pong or asteroids, that way they knew when a sprite touched another sprite. Alright, so we have that. Now let's go back up to the code and continue on. So we have a continuous gravitational pull, and that's by changing y velocity by -1 and then changing the y coordinate by -1. Now what that would do is if we don't have this function here, just drag it right on down through the stage and continue falling because gravity. Now you can change this by other negative numbers to get a different gravitational effect, but I thought this one was pretty smooth and pretty close to reality. So let's go ahead and take a look at touch ground. Now this is where the absolute value function comes into play. Now this is a pre-made function. We didn't have to set up this function. So if we go into operators here, we have access to pre-made functions that does math for us. So we can do the square root, the sine and cosine, we can do absolute value, And it does it all for you, so you don't have to program a separate function for it. So basically what absolute value is the positive value of a number. So -8 is 8 and 8 is 8. Now we need that because this is consistently pulling it down. Even though you just see 0 and -1, it's going so fast that we don't see the number. So sometimes when I press that, if you notice, it turned to -8. Now what we need in order to climb in the air when we jump is to go to a +8. So if we go back up here and you see when we press space, we need to set to 8. Now this is going to run before we press space. So that way we know when we press it, it will have the absolute value of 8. So if we go down here and I press space, you notice it turns to 8. The velocity turns to 8 and then drops back down. Now how this is working is if y velocity is less than 0, meaning that gravity is still pulling it, then we're going to repeat this. So repeat until not touching ground. So repeat until I am jumping or space is pressed. And remember, when we press space, it's going to jump. That's why that's here. Do this. We're going to set y velocity to the absolute value of y velocity divided by y velocity. So basically what that means is 8 divided by 8 is 1. Or the absolute value, if this was -8, would be 8. And if this was 8, it would be 8. And that would be 1. So that way we're always accelerating up in the air and we're not getting sucked down into the ground. Now, you notice how this is flickering. Now, how are we making this so it doesn't bounce up and down? Because this should be bouncing up and down. And the way we do that is if we go in here, we turn on run without screen refresh. Now, because we're not using color detection and we're using math to detect whether or not we're touching something, we can do this. So, now we have that. What we're doing here is we're accelerating up and changing that by the y velocity. And then we change my variable to 1, saying that we have, this is just a flag to say that we are jumping. Now we're going here, and this is going to detect it to see if we've touched the ceiling. That's why we have either touching ground or if we jumped. So that way we can reactivate gravity and pull it back down. So if we're not touching the ground, we're going to repeat this until we're not touching the ground. So if we're touching the ceiling, until we're not touching the ceiling. So, or if the jump button is pressed again. So if we're double jumping, we want gravity to take the llama back down to the ground. So it's going to repeat this loop until then. This here is another flag that lets us know that we've already double jumped. So we can't like double jump consistently. So we're going through the map. Now sometimes it will do that depending on a few bugs I'm still working out. And then we're going to set my variable saying that I am now done jumping to 0. So that way it won't re-enter this until we've pressed spacebar again and set the variable to 1 again. And now what we're doing is we need a negative number again, because the negative number is going to drag it down because it's acting as gravity. So what we are going to do with that is we're going just to multiply the absolute value of y velocity divided by y velocity, which is 1, by -1, which will then pull it back down to the ground. Because -1, if we change y by -1, it's gravity. So it's pulling it back down to the ground. All right, so we have that function. Now we're going to go back up here and check out what else is going on. So when I press space, we're going to change the y velocity to 8. Now this changes to a +8 because of this function down here, the touch ground. And then we're going to say that we've jumped. Now we want to double jump. We want that feature of double jumping. So let me turn on this variable here, jumped. So if we go into variables and we turn on jumped, we'll notice when I touch the spacebar, it changes the value. So spacebars are all our buttons are very sensitive. So when I just touch it once, it goes to 3 instead of just 1. So that's why I have it at 5, because my spacebar tends to put it at 5. So that allows us to double jump, but not continually double jump through the screen. So that's what that's doing. That's changing it by 5. And what happens is if jumped is less than 5, we can continue to jump. But if it's greater than 5, we can't jump again. And that's what this does here. So if we double jump once and we press space again, it's going to clear that double jump so we can double jump again, but not double jump continually because it has to touch the ground first to reset the double jump. So that's how that works. And again, jumped is just like this. And if you want to add like triple jump, you can make this go up higher. Or if you want even a lower double jump, you can make this value go down lower. All right, so now we're going to go into the right arrow keys, which makes our right and left arrow key, which makes our sprite go back and forth. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to point in the correct direction, and then we're going to use this function here. Now this function is not original. I didn't create this one. I found it on the Scratch's wiki page, which I'll leave a link in the description of this video so you can read that article yourself. So what we're doing is we're passing this value here of 3 into this function. And we can do that when we create this function by adding an input. So what's happening here is basically this value here is being copied into this value here, which is a variable of this function. So if x velocity is 3, distance is now storing 3. So we're going to change x by 3. Now we're going to set the slope variable to 0. Now slope is going to allow us to see if we're climbing up a slope. And it increments every time we go up on the y velocity, or the y, up on y velocity and the y coordinate. So let me turn that on so you can see that as well. So we're going to go here, click slope, and you can see as I climb up this, oh, here we go. As I climb up this, the slope changes. And if the slope becomes too high, I can't pass through it. So how that's working is it first checks to see if we are greater than the maximum slope, which we have set to 8. Now we can change this if we want, even if I want our sprite to climb up higher or lower, depending on what our sprite is. So there we go, there's that. And not touching the ground. So that allows us to detect if the sides of the platforms here. It is because the slope, if we jump up here, if you notice there, slope turned to 9. So we're going to make sure that, and if that happens, we are going to change the slope by 1. So that way it'll increment all the way until it's greater than 8, and then we can't pass through it. And that happens very fast. That's why you see this here and we can't pass through. Now, if the slope is greater than 8, what we're going to do is change the distance depending on the way it's going. So if we're pointing this way, it's a positive 3. So a positive 3, 0 minus a positive 3 is a negative 3, which will push us back 3 spaces. Now, if we're going the other way, that's a negative 3. So 0 minus a negative 3 is a positive 3 because the two negative signs cancel each other out and make it a positive. And that's happening on both the x and the y coordinate. So that way, if we're going up, it'll push us back down. Pretty cool. Okay, so now we have that. Let's move on to the next function. And again, the link to the article that gave me this function will be in the description of the video. So next what we're doing is making sure that our sprite never sinks below the ground here and gets pulled all the way down. And that's just here. So if y position ever becomes less than its standing y position, it just sets it right back to its normal one. And that happens. It's just a good way to get rid of the bug, especially if you have lots of slopes. And then we go down here and we switch back to Llama. So this here is making sure that we're always in Hipbox and switching back to the Llama costume. So that's just another layer to make our animation even smoother. So let's go on down and let's check out how we animated this. So here is the forever loop with the animation. So we're running this along with the other forever loop here for this one click block. Now the way this is working is, let's go on ahead down here, is we're using the timer. Now when we start code, there is a built-in clock. So I turn that on, let's see that. So we can see the time always going. Now we can use that to our advantage, because if we just use the wait blocks in control here, we actually pause the program, which will make the game really slow. Now, if we use a timer, we're just using the timing from here, and we're not pausing the game. We're just using clock here. So what we can do is we can actually reset the timer. So every time I hit one of the arrow keys, it's going to reset the timer to 0, and it's going to count to 0.2 seconds. Which means every time it is greater than 0.2 seconds, we're going to flicker between Hipbox and the Llama costume. Then we reset timer and then go to the next one, which then creates this awesome smooth animation that you see right here. See how it works? So it's always a good idea when we're working with our sprites and animating them is to use the timer instead of the wait. So it'll make our games run so much smoother. Then we're going to go down here and we do the same idea that we did in the game we just created. We do the next level functions. As you can see here, it increments up and then it changes. And then we also have this detect obstacle, which detects to see if the robot's there. And if we do, we just go back to the start. Now if we look into the levels, it's the same code that we used in the previous game. But you can copy this code if you want to keep looping through the game every time you reach the end of the game. And here we go with the next level stage, which is this here, and switching the costumes. And the same thing with the donuts. Rows incrementing. Once the llama increments by 1, we switch into the costumes and they appear. And same with the robot. So feel free to use this code. I will be posting this on the blog post where you find all of our tutorials on the Tompkins County Public website at tcpl.org. And feel free to remix and use this code for your own projects. And I hope that this helps you jump into gaming, and now you can go out and create your own platformer. So I hope you enjoyed this video series, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching.